Well, hey everybody, this is Pastor Chris, and I want to welcome you back to our series, Simply Advent. This is our last week of Advent, the fourth week, and as we talked about last week, each week has a word, a theme that goes with it. And it's hope and peace and joy. And then this week we're going to be talking about love. And to do that, we wanted to bring in a couple guests. We have Ann here, Ann is on staff here at the church. You've been on staff how long now?
A little over a year.
Has it really been that long?
Yes.
Oh, it feels like 5. No, I'm joking. No. And Ann was brought on to lead our special needs ministry, but has recently taken on a passion for coffee and our coffee shop. So if you have ordered a drink from the church in the last 3 months, she's probably been behind that.
And it was really good.
It was amazing, except for the pumpkin spice thing. So. And then this is Grant, and I'll let Grant.
Hi, yeah, Grant Hash. I'm Ann's husband. For going on 13 years, we established 5 minutes ago. So, hello.
And now I wanted to bring you guys on because we're talking about love. And so we're going to be taking caller questions. If you want, I'm just joking. It's not like a dating advice show. No, it's a different kind of love. I think a lot of times when we hear love, especially as Christians, we think about the paperweight that you pick up at Mardel Christian Books. It's love is kind, and that's all it says, and it just kind of leaves it there. And it's this sterile, romanticized version of love. And if you've lived in the real world more than 7 minutes, you know that love isn't always like that. There are moments, but love is often hard and it's often challenging. And that is especially true in our families, and especially in our families when maybe life gives us something a little unexpected. And I know that's been a bit of your story. And I want
a lot of our story.
And I would love for you to share that story with everybody watching today.
Sure. So, as Grant said, we've been married for about 13 years, and we met in college, and we both played sports, and life was good. And
which sports? I need to know.
Softball and football.
Nice.
At Emporia State. And we met in the dorms and started dating right after college and got married and just everything going swell. And we had our first baby. And when he turned 5, we, went back and forth. Oh, he's so perfect. Should we have another one? And we did. And we had Bo, who's now 4.
Okay.
And when he was born, everything was fine. And when he was born, he went straight to the NICU. And they told us, oh, it'll just be like a week. He just needs to get, some fluid out of his lungs. He'll be fine. And then a week turned into 2, and things just weren't going well. He'd have trouble breathing. He'd turn blue. They'd have to give him oxygen. And so
I can't imagine what you're going through in those weeks. That's got to be
what
probably, especially from coming from a place where like Ann said before, we had lived what I would describe as a pretty blessed life in terms of our relationship, our first child, no issues, ahead of the curve, so to speak, things like that. Yeah. So it was one of those things that you hear about people going through things, and we spent a month in the NICU, or we spent 3 months in the NICU. Yeah. You hear those things, but they don't really register with you.
Right.
So then when you're living it, it's truly kind of a rude awakening that you never expect to go through something like that. You always it's one of those things that you say, well, not us.
Yeah.
And then we ended up kind of living right in the middle of it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
So after about 3 weeks, they said, oh, he has reflux, and sent us home. Great. So at, I think, our 3-4 month appointment, our doctor was like, he needs more tummy time. He's just not, he's just not doing the things that we would expect. And okay. And I didn't really think anything of it. We held him all the time, and I remember it was because he was in the NICU, I wanted to hold him all the time.
Yeah.
And he just didn't get to do all the things that little babies do. So eventually, he just didn't really progress. So I remember the doctor calling us after an appointment, and she said, "We're going to send you to neurology at Children's Mercy."
Oh, wow.
And the floor kind of dropped out. And I remember asking her, "Well, what do you think is going on?"
Yeah.
And she was like, "We don't know, but there's some red flags, and we just want to make sure everything's fine." I'm sure it's fine. Everything seems fine. So after about 6 months of all kinds of tests and MRIs and
Everything coming back normal.
pokes and just all kinds of stuff, he was diagnosed with a genetic mutation called GNA01.
GNA01?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Which, if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt real quick. I know we're going to be talking a lot about Bo and his special needs, and I am not as familiar with that world as I need to be. And so I just want to say right now, if I phrase anything or say anything wrong, do not hesitate to call me out on that.
There's no wrong.
Well, I know, but I want to be as respectful as I can, and I want this to be a learning moment for me, and I know I'm not the only one, so it may be a learning moment for others. So if I say anything that you're like, no, just say no. So.
Yeah. So I just remember getting that call and being like, "Well, I've never heard of that, so it must not be anything bad." I had no idea. So then I kind of just asked the nurse, like, "Well, what do I do now?"
Yeah.
And she was like, "Well, we have a couple of patients in Kansas City," and I was asking questions like, "Well, do they walk? Do they talk?" And she kept saying, "Not yet." And I said, "Well, what do I do? Do I Google?" And she goes, "We don't advise that you Google."
You never Google, like.
So I Googled. And then I think I was in bed for 2 weeks or a week, just could not get out of bed. Was just crying and couldn't eat. And so Grant kind of took over from there for a while because I was, I had gone for about almost a year he's just a little behind, and I'm going to do everything I can to get him up to speed. And then when that fell out, we didn't know what to do. Even though I was a teacher, I had never really lived in this world, and I had no idea what to expect. And so that was kind of when our lives took a turn.
This may be really personal.
All right.
What were you feeling in those 2 weeks? I mean, like, just as a parent, I just can't. Well, there's got to be so many different feelings in that.
Yeah, and I know, like me personally, I think Ann was coaching softball at the time. And she got the call, I think, while she was at softball practice. And I was home, and she, if I recall correctly, she called me and said, "Children's Mercy called, it's really, really bad." And didn't really know what to think about that. Okay. I think she got home, and we talked a little bit about it. And I still remember our older son, Everett, again at the time, he probably would have been 6 or so now. And he had a baseball game that evening, and I was his baseball coach. And I remember trying to process everything we just found out about Bo while also helping Everett get his baseball uniform on to go coach baseball. And it just seemed like such an odd dynamic that just found out this information about our 1-year-old.
Yeah.
But it was that it kind of hit you in the mouth a little bit that the world doesn't stop. Nothing, everything kind of keeps going, and you might be outside of your body at the time. I remember that feeling of just found out this news, but we have a 6-year-old that has a baseball game, and kind of trying to process that dynamic was difficult. And I think in many respects, we still try to process that.
Yeah.
There's almost these two lives that we lead that are very, very different. But trying to kind of manage that and balance that between those two lives. But I remember that distinctly. Within an hour of finding this out, Dad, can you help me get my pants on for my baseball game?
Yeah.
And I just remember that really odd feeling right after that.
I'm guessing that the way you demonstrate your love between your two kids is quite different.
Yes.
That has to be an interesting dynamic, like you said. Like, it's just...
Yeah. I mean, I think, to go back to your question, what I was at least thinking was, when you get married and you have kids, you have a dream. Mm-hmm. You have this vision of what you think your life is going to look like. And my dream just was shattered. And I'm never going to get it back. And I still think that often. We talk about that often.
Yeah.
I'm still not where... Gosh, this wasn't supposed to happen to us.
Yeah.
We did everything right, and this wasn't supposed to happen to us. And so, from that, I mean, it's probably a daily struggle for me to make sure, and we've talked about, make sure Everett, our older son, gets everything he needs, because he didn't ask for. None of us asked for this, and Bo didn't ask for this, and so. It's hard to, balance all of Bo's needs. Therapy. He goes to 2 different schools. He has, I think I counted, he has 18 adults that help him per week. So getting them Christmas presents, but, just balancing
it's
that.
A lot of Starbucks gift cards.
It is. I bought them all Starbucks gift cards.
Literally. Yeah.
Yes. And making sure Everett gets to do everything that he wants to do. And he's a smart kid and he's an athletic kid, and making sure we are able to keep him in sports and hanging out with friends, and making sure they're developing at their own pace.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. Now, I kind of interrupted. What exactly does that diagnosis mean for Bo? Like, for those who aren't familiar, what does that look like?
So, when I first started Googling,
Once again, we do not advise Googling anything related to health.
I always tell people, don't Google it. But I did come across a foundation, which is funny because it's called the Bo Foundation, but it's B-O-W.
Okay.
Bo. And so I emailed the director of that foundation, and I think I emailed SOS, and I said, I just got our diagnosis.
Yeah.
I have no idea what to do. What is happening? Help.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my gosh, you can call me anytime, but here's kind of what we know. At the time, there were 50-some people in the world with that diagnosis.
50.
Now there is a little less than 200.
Wow.
So there's a spectrum of, there are some kids who are diagnosed, well, they're young adults now, but they can walk and talk, and maybe they're just slightly delayed.
Okay.
To kids like Bo, who are nonverbal, non-mobile. He eats through a G-tube in his stomach. He needs us 100% of the time, every day. So some kids also have the epilepsy side, and some kids have a movement disorder, so they can't control their movements.
Okay.
He has both.
Oh, wow.
Even fewer of the kids have both. And so we're some of the ones that do have both. And so I just remember telling Grant right after he was diagnosed, I just want him to be able to walk or talk. I don't care which one.
Yeah.
And he cannot yet.
How has this affected your relationship? Because, parenting is hard in general, and parenting changes everything. Whenever I talk to younger friends and they're talking about having kids, it's always like, just know it all changes. And so for you, that's like double or triple or quadruply true, I'm guessing.
Yes. Well,
you mentioned something earlier when you said it, my ears kind of perked up, that like love is hard. It sounds kind of cliche, but life's really hard.
Yeah.
Right? Just kind of finding your way through things and figuring out what works for individuals and things like that. And so that's hard enough individually. Then when you sort of put two people together that are both doing that and kind of trying to mesh a relationship and sort of have one life together, kind of exacerbates some of those difficulties of just life in general. And then to your point, when you throw kids into the mix, just a whole other set of challenges that comes along with that. And I know we probably, like any relationship, when we kind of started to build our lives together, you're figuring out different family dynamics. Well, I was raised this way, and I was raised this way, and I know we struggled with those things for a long time, but kind of worked our way through it. And then the funny thing about us, when it comes to raising kids, and initially Everett, our oldest, we've always very much been on the same page with parenting. Not saying we agree on everything, but we typically back each other up. When if one goes to mom and then tries to get a different answer from dad, we always kind of have each other's back when it comes to that.
I have a 9-year-old daughter, so we play that game quite often.
100%. So we've always very much been on the same page there, and I think that's probably helped us a lot with Bo. Again, a whole other set of challenges than we had with Everett. But I think understanding kind of what his needs are and balancing that with what Everett's needs are, I think we've actually rolled pretty well with those punches. But there was a period there, for a year or two after that diagnosis, I would say we probably weren't on the same page with
we weren't on the. He doesn't need to say probably.
Yeah,
we weren't on the same page.
I don't think most couples would be on the same page.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like we're still sometimes maybe not on the same page. But I was just texting a girl I coached who just got engaged, and she's terrified. And
of marriage?
Of being married.
Okay.
And I was just saying, marriage is really hard, but we do it really well because he has his strengths and I have mine, and I don't think that we try to butt into each other's strengths. And we know where to pick each other up. There are some days when he's just like, I cannot deal with this. I'm going into our room for a while. And I'm like, okay. And it's just kind of the way that it is. We just are able to emotionally pick each other up, physically, like we can help out where we need to. And I just think that's, for some reason, we've been able to do that well. Could be therapy. I also suggest that just to have a third party that can not be in it, but kind of see where people are going the wrong direction.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Well, here's a question for you, either of you. What would you want to say to those who are like me and maybe aren't as familiar with special needs and what it's like to be a special needs family as maybe I should be? What would you want to say to those individuals out there? What do people get wrong, or what do you think people need to know?
So when Bo was in the NICU, I would be getting texts and emails and calls constantly, just people really caring about him and our family. And so I started an Instagram page just to inform everybody, so I didn't have to text everybody back. Well, that's kind of as he's, been diagnosed and as he goes through struggles, and we go through struggles and really good times. I put it on his Instagram, but it's also turned into just a special needs awareness platform.
Yeah.
And so before we lived in this world, I never had to think of elevators, ramps, larger changing tables. That never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
When I walk into a store, I think, well, if Bo was doing this by himself, how would he even get in here? There's no button. How's he going to go all the way around to get up the ramp? I think so. One of my goals in life now has turned into being aware of other people and their struggles. I just think that is really important, and I think the accessibility of our world is not made for anybody who's not the typical human. I think that's kind of where my passion is, just making sure everyone is included and loved and cared for and cared about, which is why I love this job.
Yeah.
And I tell Grant that all the time. I do. I say I love my job because it does open people's eyes to a different world that I would have never known about. And I always say that to people, like, don't feel bad that you don't know something. I didn't know either.
Yeah.
The only reason I know is because I live it.
We would never expect anybody to kind of know those little details of our lives or what someone with special needs goes through on a daily basis, but it's more just an awareness that, hey, the way that the world presents itself to me isn't how it presents itself to everybody.
Wow.
I think if you're just aware of that, that goes a long way. Because I would say until Bo, we didn't even have that. Because again, I think we all just kind of live in our own little bubbles to some extent. So I think as long as you just know that, like, hey, like Ann said, me opening this door, what a convenience that would be to some people. And just the awareness that it's not that way for everybody, I think goes a long way.
Christ, when he's basically summing up the Old Testament law and the gospel, says, it all boils down to loving God with all of your heart and loving your neighbor as yourself. And I think it's so easy to not fully understand what it means to love your neighbor because you don't know what your neighbor is going through. I think it's just such a good message. What would you say? I know there are other families out there that had this picture in their mind of what it was supposed to look like. This was the Hallmark movie we were going to live. And then it didn't end up being that. Whether that is something with one of their kids or the situation they find themselves in. What would you say to those families, especially in terms of keeping your marriage together when the Hallmark movie, turns out to not be a Hallmark movie?
I know something we do talk about is, we used to worry about things with our older son, like Ann's a smart kid, good athlete and stuff like that. We used to worry about things that seem somewhat trivial now of, well, is he going to be a pitcher or is he going to play quarterback or what if he's not hitting the ball during baseball? And the challenges that not only that we have, but the Bo has more so, have kind of put a spotlight on what's really important for us. So I would like to think in a lot of ways being Bo's parents has made us better parents in general to both of our kids in terms of focusing on what really matters and really just them being happy. And I think it's made us both probably more sympathetic people. And also we hope for our older son, made him a more sympathetic person and understanding that not everything that comes easy to him comes easy to everyone else. And part of that is also part of our relationship and being more sympathetic to each other in terms of, hey, when I'm tired or when I've just had enough, I need you to step up for me. So I think it's probably made us a little more understanding in our relationship. Obviously it's created a lot of challenges that we didn't anticipate, but it's probably made us more understanding of each other and what our needs are. Doesn't mean it's always easy, because it's still stressful and exhausting and things like that, but being able to understand what the other one is feeling, I think in a lot of ways probably brought us closer together.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to end by giving Ann a chance to advertise whatever you want about your ministry here, about what you're doing. If people want to get involved,
Yes.
this is where you drop
Shameless plug. Yes.
plugs.
So what we're really excited about right now is coffee shop, right?
Yep.
So I would really like to encourage people to come volunteer for us. What makes us different is we are really trying to bring in volunteers that want to be mentors to those who have special needs, to get some job experience, some socialization practice.
Yeah.
So I think that sets us apart from any other coffee shop.
So it's
in the
about more
area,
than
for
just
sure.
coffee.
We're not just coffee. We're trying to really help everyone be involved and included and, but embraced, which is
that's the name of our
ministry.
special needs ministry.
Yes. So I think that's kind of the big push. I know with COVID, it's just been hard for kids like Bo to do anything extracurricular. But we are doing things like open gyms with the coffee shop and just letting people have an outlet and know that everyone belongs here and they have a friend and a space and they're loved here.
That's awesome. And if you guys want to get involved, Ann's email will be in the notes section. Click on that, drop her a message, and get plugged in.
Yeah.
And so thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, Calpre. This is Pastor Chris here, and we just finished up a bunch of filming at the church. Filming for, well, the service you're watching right now, and Christmas Eve, and even next Sunday. And all of it has been incredible. I'm really excited about what God is doing through Calpre. But I keep thinking back to that interview that I got to do with Ann and Grant just a few minutes ago. And I can't let go of it. But first of all, I just want to thank them for their willingness to share, their vulnerability. It is not easy to get on camera and tell a story like that. And so if you're watching live right now, I would love to just say thank you to them. And so if you could, there's that little heart button on the chat. If you could just pound on that and let them know how much you appreciate them being willing to come on here and pour their hearts out, I think that'd be pretty awesome. And then number two, we actually recorded a whole lot more than you got to see. The whole interview was over 40 minutes long, and I wish I could have shown you all of that, but if I had, it would have been about the length of one of Pastor Dan's sermons, and we didn't want to go there. I'm joking. I love Pastor Dan and his sermons and my job. No, we just had to cut it down to fit into the service today. But if you would like to see that full interview, you can check out the link in the notes tab, or you can go to our YouTube page at youtube.com/CawPrairie. But you know what I think I love about their story is just how relatable it is. Yeah, you may not have a child who has a genetic mutation that is extremely rare. I don't. But I bet you do have an example in your life where you expected things to go one way and they went another. I mean, isn't that what 2020 has been? I keep seeing these memories pop up on Facebook where it's like the 1 year ago you posted this, and all of my friends posted things like, 2020 is about to start and it's going to be my year. This is the one where I conquer the world, I accomplish all my goals. And clearly it's humorous now because that didn't happen. This year, as you know, has been a mess. And nothing looks like we thought it was going to look. If you're at a place right now where you're like, this Christmas, the one I'm about to celebrate, looks exactly like I thought it would look a year ago, then you've probably been drinking too much eggnog because nothing looks like we thought it was going to look. It has been a year of the unexpected. But you know, that's the story at the heart of Christmas. At the heart of it all is this young couple, Mary and Joseph, who were engaged. We joked in the interview about how we thought life was going to be like a Hallmark movie, and maybe they did too. I haven't studied enough about first century Jewish engagement and marriage and parenting to know all the details, but I know enough to say that when Mary was growing up and she imagined what all those things would be like, it probably wasn't playing out like she thought it would or hoped it would. Same with Joseph. I mean, we've heard the story so much it's kind of numb to us now, but imagine being engaged to the love of your life and she comes up to you and explains that, well, she's pregnant and it's not yours. And so you freak out thinking she's cheated on you. You ask, well, whose baby is it? And she explains, well, it's God's baby. You know, we nod our heads now because we know the story, but he didn't know the story. What a moment, what a test. That's not how he pictured becoming a father. And then when she gets pregnant and they're going through that whole process, and then at the last minute they have to take this trip, a trip to be a part of a census, to pay taxes, and you think you're mad at the government right now. Imagine being in the 9th month of your pregnancy and having to take a road trip to be a part of a census and pay taxes. I think back to when Sally was pregnant with Ollie. I mean, towards the end there, we had everything planned out that we could have planned out. We had bags packed by the door. We had extra bags packed in the car. The car seat was already installed. We were working with the hospital in constant contact with the doctors and the nurses. I had maps, routes for how to get to every place we would go to get straight to the hospital in case that was the moment. I mean, we had it all planned out, and even then, we were still a nervous wreck. I mean, maybe some of you were like that when you had your first child. If that's you, click the heart button. Let me know you're with me. I'm sure that they had plans too, and that wasn't it. You know, Luke tells us just these couple verses here that we've read so many times, but it says, and while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. Now, just that right there, think about the panic of that moment when you knew it was happening. So she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. Now, I've said it before and I'm going to say it one more time. Sometimes nativity scenes drive me crazy. I mean, the one that Dan used in communion, I love it. There are others that I love. But sometimes I see them where they're porcelain and they're covered in gold and they've got precious gems and they're beautiful. A few years ago, I went online to see what the most expensive nativity scene I could find was. And I started on Amazon and I found several that were $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. And then I found sites that they would custom make them out of precious metals. And I mean, they got to $10,000 and $20,000. And I just thought, could you miss the point anymore? See, the beauty of the nativity scene was its ugliness. It was ugly. It was messy. It was complicated. And that was the point. That's where God shows up. When Matthew introduces Jesus, it says he's Emmanuel, which translates to God with us. He dwells with us, not in just the beautiful hallmark moments of life, but in the ugly, the messy, and the complicated. And that's what I loved about their story, is that even as they went through all the trials, when things didn't turn out the way they thought they were going to turn out, God was still with Anne. God was still with Grant. God was still with their family. In fact, having worked with Anne and become friends with Anne, we joke around a lot. I have to fix her printer like every other week, and about every other week she tries to trick me into drinking pumpkin spice. But in the midst of that friendship, I have seen God dwelling in her and her life. That's the Christmas story, is that God enters into our lives wherever we are, makes a dwelling, God with us. So that's my encouragement for you this morning as we wrap up Advent. No matter what this year has looked like for you, no matter what you thought this year was going to look like for you, know that even in the midst of the ugly, the messy, and the complicated, God is with you. Let's pray. God, let us remember the true message of Christmas, that Jesus comes to bring us hope and peace and joy and love. In Jesus' name, amen.